Hey, good morning, everybody. How we doing? Turn in your Bibles, if you would, to Genesis chapter 15. We continue our series called The Story. While you're doing that, two Australian blokes, kind of rock and roll stars, were in New York City, and they had just done a concert. It was sold out, so they were quite happy, and they do what most Aussies do after a concert. They found the local pub, started to drink a little bit and celebrate. Had a little too much to drink, found themselves wandering around New York City, totally lost, incoherent, didn't know where they were. And of course, now they're facing public intoxication. So a police officer wanders by, looks at them, and the two Australian blokes are so incoherent and lost, they don't even know up or down. And they look to the guy and they say, "Excuse me, fella, can you tell us where we are?" And the police officer looked at him and says, "Folks, do you know who I am?" And one of the Australians looked at his other Australian friend and said, "Boy, we're in a real fix now. We don't know where we are, and this fella doesn't know who he is." And I know it's not that funny, but it's a good start, because what we're doing in the story, we're trying to say that the story, first of all, somebody said it like this, that history is his story recorded in the story. That it's the story of God, what he's been doing from the very beginning, and where he's taking creation, what the destination really is. And we're learning through the story, we're supposed to be learning where we are in the scheme of things and where it is that we're going. And that's what the story does effectively, because ultimately it answers the four questions people have asked from the beginning. Origin, meaning, morality, destiny. Where do I come from? All found in the story. What is the meaning of my life? What am I supposed to do with my life? Morality, how then should I live? And destiny, ultimately, where's the world going? Where am I going? Where does it all end up? And the story makes an attempt to answer that. Last week, we learned two valuable truths, and I hope you haven't forgotten yet. Number one is this, that God created the world ex nihilo, which means that God created the world out of nothing. You will not find another creation account in ancient civilization anywhere similar to the Bible. They are similar in and among themselves. They are very different from the Bible. The Bible does not have God's plurality or some sea monster coming up out of the ocean to create man and create the world. It has God above and beyond creating everything out of nothing. This God creates the stuff from which all the other stuff comes. And because he creates everything out of nothing, he is sovereign. There's nothing to be afraid of. He is not ruled by anything. He is above and beyond all parts of creation. What you create, you have total sovereignty over. We learned, second, that God created the world for you and me. We're the centerpiece. It was made for us. It was made to compel us toward him, so that when we walk out and we see the mountains and the sky and we see the oceans, and when we go to our favorite place, sometimes there's just a connection you feel with a beautiful place on the planet. It's supposed to compel you toward God. It's supposed to have you think, wow, this is indeed beautiful. I feel a connection. There's something special here, and we're supposed to be drawn toward the Creator. But not only does it compel us, it also gives us everything we need for survival. The food chain is a miracle of God. If you've ever studied environmental science, it's amazing how it appears, in the words of some scientists, that the universe knew we were coming. It is made specifically for us to breathe and to live and to enjoy God's good creation. And that's why when God looked at it in the first part of our story, he said it is good. And we said the Hebrew word for good there does not mean good versus bad. It means good meaning it's effective, it's productive, it works, therefore it's good. It works in that it compels people to God. It works in the sense that you and I can live and breathe and have life right here on planet Earth. Now, let's enter into some dialogue, okay, just a little bit before we skip on to the next narrative. It's important to do this. And it's going to take a little thinking on your part, and that's not a bad thing. Okay? You're going to need to concentrate. So forget about Starbucks, forget about what you're going to do afterwards, forget about the coffee you didn't get, forget about the fight you had on the way to church with your wife, forget all about that. Listen. Let's play a little bit of role play. The first question that usually gets asked is, Pastor Jeff, and we dealt with this a little bit last week, God creates this beautiful, wonderful world, and then he puts a tree in the middle of the garden and ruins everything. Why does he put the tree in the middle of the garden? Now, for you and me, that's a hard question, but for ancient civilization, that's not a hard question at all. Remember that Genesis was written for us, but not to us. Moses is recording the creation account for behalf of ancient civilization to answer the questions they would have had in that day, that time. It's like you and I picking up a letter, we read it, and we realize it's not written to us, but wow, it's incredibly applicable, so it is written for us. And God places the tree in the middle of the garden, you're walking by. Think about it. He doesn't put the tree somewhere in a cave where it's hard to find. No, he puts the one tree that you can't have right in the middle. So every day you're going, there's that tree again. There's that doggone tree again. I can have everything, but I can't have that. Why? Ancient civilization would have understood perfectly. A king has the right to ask you every single day of your life, who are you going to follow, who are you going to serve, who are you going to obey? If the king is sovereign over his kingdom as God is sovereign over this world, he has the right to say, okay, every day you're forced to make a choice. Are you going to serve, follow, and obey the God, the creator of all things, or are you going to serve, follow, and obey something that's created? There are trees that continue to exist in everybody's life. Every day, every person in this room, you walk by something that's just like the tree. You walk by something, you have to decide, am I going to follow and obey God, or am I going to follow and obey this thing? And every time you choose to obey this thing, death comes into your life. You see, that's the symbolism here. That's the metaphor. Every single day of your life, all of us are faced with a choice. For some of you, it's things you look at. For others of you, it's money and how you operate. If you're fair, if you're honest, if you're just, it goes on and on and on. And this world is a world that's chosen not to follow God, but to follow this. And because they follow this, our world is in the condition it's in today. So they would have understood. But there's another question. Okay, Pastor Jeff, got the tree stuff. But Pastor Jeff, why would God create a world in which he knew the people were going to rebel? God knows everything. Now, here's the first part of my answer. As parents, you have no guarantee that your children are going to turn out good. You don't. In fact, the odds are against you. They're probably going to turn out like you. Right? Right? And you know what you're all about. There are many mothers on the planet whose kids are on death row that still love their kids. The reason you take the risk of having children is because you know it's worth it. The idea that you would have a child and that child would love you and honor you and there'd be a love relationship is worth the risk that they might end up in Leavenworth and rebel against you. I know the next question now. You're saying, well, wait, Jeff, but I don't have foreknowledge. I don't have the knowledge of what's going to happen. God did. God knew that this was going to happen, and he still did it. Now, two things. Number one, I'm suggesting to you that you, even if you knew your child was not going to turn out well, you'd still have him for the moments of love. You'd still have him. But in God's case, you have to understand something. If we had a bowl here, and we're going to stick everything in it that would include the recipe that would end up coming out to love. Think about, what do you have to have love? Freedom, right? We've covered that, but emotion, passion, desire, all of those have to be put into this scenario if you're going to have love in the created story. The problem is, with every ingredient you put into the bowl that will bring forth love, those are the same ingredients required to bring forth evil. Passion, desire, emotion, all of those. The only way God can create a world that has no potential for evil or rebellion is to create a world that has no potential for love and relationship. It's two sides of the same coin. So God, yes, he does create, but he creates in mind knowing that even though rebellion is going to happen, he's going to redeem the world. That's what the story's about. He's going to redeem mankind back to himself. And every time you walk by a tree in your life, whatever it is, if it's an addiction, if it's a relationship, whatever it is, every time you walk by and you choose God, you're moving closer and closer into a relationship where one day he will be your God, you will be his people. Now, it goes one step further. Do I still have you? We got to cover this, because I didn't want to be the kind of church, let's just talk about the things that are easy and ignore the things that are hard. In one respect, the existence of rebellious humanity glorifies God more than the non-existence of glorious or rebellious humanity. I'll leave that up there for a moment. Stay with me. If you're thirsty for a day, water's nice, but if you're thirsty for a week, water is beautiful. If you're hungry for a day, food is good, but if you're hungry and you've been fasting for 40 days, that In-N-Out burger tastes like manna from heaven. Right? The more thirsty you are, the greater the value of water. The more hungry you are, the greater value of food. Good can only be appreciated in the context of bad. God allows to let the wheat and the tares grow together, the good and the bad, in order that you and I might have an ability to distinguish between the both. And that one day, the Bible says in the book of Revelation, at the end of the story, the great rider on the white horse is going to come down, and he has a name written on his thigh. Now, young people, that's not an excuse for you to get a tattoo. He has a name written on his thigh, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And he is going to bring everything right. And he is going to be worshiped for eternity because we were able to see the contradistinction or the distinction between good and evil, and that he is all that is good. And this miserable world that we've lived in, even though it has all of its good and all of its created order and all of its things that compel us toward God, it still has so much evil because people have chosen to use their freedom rather than to pursue God, to pursue their own self-aggrandizement. And that's when people get hurt. 99.9% of the pain and suffering in this world is not God. It's how you and I treat each other. But the only way God could remove that is if he removes our freedom. And if he removes our freedom, he removes the capacity of love. And love is the reason the world was made in the first place. Now, that's important to know because of this. No matter how bad things get, what you're going to find in the story is that God continues to save a remnant of people. There are two words used. We're turning our attention to Noah now just for a second. Two words used for unrighteousness in the Old Testament. The one word means that you really try to be good, you try to be righteous, you really do, and it breaks your heart when you fail, but in your humanity, you fail, and you're wounded. But there's another word for unrighteousness, and it's a word that means apathetic. You don't care about being righteous. There's no effort whatsoever, and after year after year after year, you can't even distinguish between the light and the darkness. When we come to the story of Noah, and people ask me, why would God destroy a whole group of people? You have to understand something. From the time of Adam and Eve, and you never thought you'd hear a pastor talk about DNA, from the time of Adam and Eve, it just gets passed down from one generation to the next generation, until we come to Noah, when there's not even one, other than Noah and his family, that the people are not merely unrighteous in the fact that they're trying to be good but can't. They don't even care. They're apathetic. We're talking about a generation of child sacrifice here. We're talking about some barbaric, evil, uncivilized, almost to the point of inhumane or unhumanness. That's the condition of the world. Now, just wait a minute. You know what this is like. My grandfather's name was Dean. My father's name was Grover, and my father's name was Obie Dean. Remember, I'm from Tennessee. My grandfather beat his son, my dad's dad. My dad's dad beat him so severely that he walked with a hump or with kind of a injury to his lower back where his dad beat him with a shovel for most of his life. My dad would have probably beaten us, except he met my mother who introduced him to the good news of the gospel, and my dad never laid a hand on us. Somewhere along the line, the cycle has to stop. If it doesn't, it intensifies, right? It just keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger. You take what Hitler said about the Third Reich. He said, I want to create a generation. I want to raise a generation of young people devoid of a conscience, imperious, relentless, and cruel. How do you raise a generation devoid of a conscience? By starting with the grandparents, and then to the parents, and then to the children. I'm reminded of the movie Schindler's List, and you have this scene where the Gestapo comes in to clear out the ghetto. The Jews aren't dying quickly enough, and so in the movie, the Gestapo comes in and they start basically to just shoot people at point blank range to kill entire families, and then take those who are strong enough to work, declothe them, put them on wagons to be led to the death camps. And on the sides of the street as the Jews are exiting the ghetto, you have these young children shouting, "Goodbye, Jews, goodbye, Jews, goodbye, Jews." How do you create that much hate? How do you create a whole generation without a moral conscience? You do so by starting with the grandparents, and it passes down further and further. Think about racism, okay? If you have a racist parent, the child is even more so, and then their children are even more so till it gets out of control. The point I'm trying to say is, if you remember the movie Lord of the Rings, you have Gollum. Here is Gollum before he's overwhelmed with pride and covetousness, and then here's Gollum after. He almost becomes unhuman. In the days of Noah, the Bible says in Genesis chapter 6, and by the way, remember what the New Testament tells us, our days are going to be like the days of Noah. And what are those days like? When the Lord God saw the extent of human wickedness and the trend and direction of men's lives were only towards evil, he was sorry he had made them. It broke his heart. Two words, extent. Here's this idea that in Noah's day, they were not only not pursuing righteousness, folks, they had no passion for it whatsoever. And it had led to generation after generation after generation of such evil that God looks down. And the Bible says he's sorry. Now let's talk about that just for a second. Sorry. Is it like God said, wow, I didn't see this coming? No. And this is the hardest part, and then we're going to the easy stuff. Please stay with me. What does it mean? God is a linear thinker, just like you and I. That's part of being created in his image. And before day one came, before God said, let there be light, God thought the whole process through, right? He says, okay, I know there is perfect unity and community in the Trinity. Let us make man in our own image. So God doesn't create us out of a need, but out of a desire. Different thing. I want community with more. And so God decides to create us because he wants love in this creation scenario. He's got to give us free will. He knows that opens the door for the potential of evil. He realizes that, but he also knows that humanity will choose to rebel, but at the same time, he also knows that he is going to enact a plan through history to redeem and restore mankind to himself. And so somewhere along the line in that linear thinking, God probably, I want to create, but his heart is wounded when he realizes when I create, there are going to be many people who choose to rebel. But just like you as a parent, he says, but there are going to be some who are going to choose to pursue. And that loving relationship is worth the creation. And so in a sense, yes, the narrator uses anthropomorphic language, the language that humanity can understand, but at the same time, he wants us to understand God is not surprised. He's had his hand on history from the beginning. He knew that we would rebel, but he also knew that he would restore. And love is such a high value, a virtue. God was willing to create an order where the potential for evil exists. Now, this is where the story gets good. Well, not good for our sake or not good for humanity, but you say, well, why did God destroy all the people before? Why that's a lot of people. If you had cancer, you would be willing to cut out the bad cells to save the good ones. God, his dream was to have community in diversity with humanity. And he was insistent that he was going to cut out the unrighteous, keep those who were seeking him, and begin anew. And even if you're not a literalist and you don't believe the story of Noah is real, which I think you would be mistaken, but even if you're not a literalist, the reality is, the metaphor still stands, that you and I are made in the image of God. We all get a choice to walk by what tree every day, and what you choose will bring death or life into your life. God destroyed the days of Noah because he wanted to stagnate the degenerative process, save what was left, and begin anew. And when the water started to subside in the story of Noah, Noah sent out and the dove came back with and today we use the olive branch as an extension of peace. Isn't that interesting? He gets an olive branch from an olive tree, and this is a peace. And one day, now do you hear the 8 running ground notes? One day, God's going to extend another something from another tree, and he's going to hang on a tree, and this is going to be his peace offering so that we'll know it's safe to come outside again because we are good with God. Now, stay with me. This is where it gets so good, and I got to cover so much, and I got like 20 minutes left. I need you. I'm going to talk fast. I doubled up on the Mountain Dews backstage. It's going to kick in any minute, but I'm going to have to talk fast. But, we're trying to cover a lot, and I need you to stay with me because here's the good news. I want to share something with you that this is the next narrative. We meet Abraham. And in Abraham's story, we have an upper level and a lower level. So there's something going on up here, and there's something going on down here. Now, we're down here, and I want to cover what's going on down here first, but you've got to stay with me. Abraham, we're introduced to. And in Genesis 15, something dramatic happens that should change every person's life in this room. You should never be the same again. If we don't get you here with the word, we will never get you. This is it. Because Abraham has 4 dramatic encounters with God. Dramatic. The first one is in Genesis 12. And Abraham is living in the land of the Chaldeans. And God comes to Abraham and he says, get out. Get out from your people. Get out from your family. Get out from your land. Get out from your country. Leave your father's house behind. Leave everything that's familiar to you and go away. Get out to a land that I will show you. And the Bible says, so Abraham got out, not knowing whither he was going. I love that. Whither. I don't know where whither is, but he didn't know where it was. And the second dramatic encounter happens in Genesis 15. Now think about it. Abraham's still just wandering. God told him to wander. He's been wandering a while. He's hitchhiking, And God says, hey, Abraham, I want to talk to you while you're on the road here. Yes, Lord. I'm going to make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sands on the seashore. Not only that, but Abraham, from your people is going to come one person that will bless entire humanity. Now, when Abraham heard that from God, Abraham's probably assuming 2 things. Number 1, you can't have a lot of kids till you have one. So God's going to give us a child. And 2, he's probably going to give us some land so that we can raise our children and protect our land In a way, as much as I hate to use the term, God is giving the promise to Abraham of health, wealth, and prosperity. There's nothing more you would have wanted in Abraham's day than wealth and land and a family and people and sons and daughters, man. It was the highest value. And then we come to Genesis chapter 17. And this time, it's like Abraham comes to God, or God comes to Abraham, but Abraham speaks first because he says, God, you know, it's been quite a few chapters now. He probably doesn't say that. He says, Lord, you said to me that you were going to give us a son, and well, God, I mean, I haven't wanted to say anything, but it's been 25 years. You know what God's response is? Abraham says, God, you said we're going to have a son in this nation and this land. God, it's been 25 years, and I'm 99 years old, God. And my wife, Sarah, she's not getting any younger. She's 90. Do you know what God says? God says, and your point is, he says, Abraham, just wait. Wait. And then we come to Genesis 22, finally, the fourth encounter. They have a son named Isaac. And you know what God says to him? I know you love your son. It's a really cool thing. I want you to take him up on top of the mountain and sacrifice him. Kill him. Somebody has schematized Abraham's life this way. Abraham says, God, I'm going to send you out. Where, God? I'll tell you later. Just go. Abraham, I'm going to give you a land. Where? I'll tell you later. Just wander. Abraham, I'm going to give you a child. When? Later. Just wait. Abraham, kill your child. Why, God? Tell you later. Just walk up the mountain, take the knife in the fire. Here's the lower story. Here's what makes Abraham so unique. Now, we're talking about the lower story right now. We'll get to the bigger story, the narrative. The lower story is this. Abraham, okay, I'm not saying it's perfect. Can you say Hagar? Yeah, do you know who Hagar is, right? It's when he got impatient with God and he said, I'm going to help God along a little bit, so I'm going to go have a relationship with a concubine, speed things up a little. So he's not perfect. But here's what you do notice about Abraham. Abraham, ultimately, when everything's said and done, over time, you'll notice he really did trust in the promises of God, even though he sometimes did not understand them completely. And because he trusted, there were times in his life he would come to God and say, God, you told me this, you said that. You know, you told me you were going to give me this land, you told me you're going to give me this people. God, I just want to know, when's it all going to happen? As a matter of fact, God, right now, I'd settle just for an okay life. Abraham is able to live a big life because he trusted in the promises of God. How did he do it? Let me help you along here. This is April Smith. She's one of the victims of the tornadoes in Arkansas. Her story has gone viral. Here's why. She lost everything. This is her house before and after. But the most precious thing she lost is in this photograph, her two sons. She and her husband and her children were in a bathtub covered with a mattress. The tornado ripped right through the center of their house. The two children died. He ended up in a hospital. She ended up in a separate one because of the significance of the injury. The story's gone viral because, well, April is a Christian. Her friend, Jessica Swords, wept for 2 days. True story, when she heard what happened to her friend. Finally, she got up the nerve to go and see her. She said there was an overwhelming sadness that the two children were gone, but there was an overwhelming stability in April that she had never seen. And it so overwhelmed her that she said to her friend April, the world has got to know the way you're dealing with this. When this is all over, I'm going to write about it. And April said, no, you're not going to write about it when it's all over. You're going to write about it now. And she did. And it went viral. Because she wrote, for those of you who wonder how April and Daniel's the husband, and you're worried about them, if they're ever going to be the same after the loss of their kids, please don't worry anymore, she said. I have seen her hope. It is anchored in eternity. It is the kind of hope that saves people, and that's not just optimism. What is she saying? How do you do that? How do you lose 2 children and keep going with your faith and trust in God? How do you do that? The same way Abraham did it. Someone has written this, that each new morning there are new widows, new orphans, new mourners, new pain. Every single day circumstances come at you. The Bible tends to tell you that when those circumstances come at you, you're either going to master them or they're going to master you. You decide. Okay, fine, Pastor Jeff, but how? Genesis 15, and we're not even there yet. Stay with me now. Genesis, it's going to tell us how Abraham was able to do it, and how April was able to do it, and how you can do it too. And in Hebrews chapter 6, it's kind of a New Testament version of what happened in Genesis chapter 15. Because God wanted to make the unchanging nature of his purpose very clear to the heirs of what was promised, he confirmed it in an oath. God did this so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled to take hold of the hope offered to us may be greatly encouraged. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. Abraham took the promises of God and he used it as an anchor for the soul, which meant that no matter what was happening around him, he trusted in the promises of God. He bowed his neck. He maintained his stride. And because of that, he lived a big life. Now, stay with me for a moment. You know what an anchor is, right? Right? Okay. When I lived in New Zealand, my friend Bill McCarthy, who loved to fish, he actually did a fishing show, took me to the Coromandel Peninsula. This is a beautiful peninsula on the southern tip of the North Island. My dad was visiting, so my dad was weak and frail. This was at a time he was really sick, but he came to see me during Christmas time. And Bill wanted to take us out fishing, so we got in this boat down the Coromandel, which is in the middle of nowhere, no houses, no nothing. We slept in tents, and humanity was not meant to sleep in tents. That's why we've evolved. And so we went down to the Coromandel Peninsula. We slept in these tents out in the open air, and he took us out fishing. He had this little boat. Did I mention little? Very little. And we went out. And in New Zealand, it's called Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud. When the clouds come over, a thing called whiteout occurs, where you can't distinguish the difference between the ocean and the sky because they're the same exact color. And so we're drifting out on this boat going fishing, right? And we're going farther and farther. And I'm getting nervous because I don't like the ocean. Now, I like the beach, but I never get in the water. I saw Jaws 1, Jaws 2, and Jaws 3. I don't get in the water, but I do love the beach. I love just chilling, reading on the beach. I don't get in the water. I get in the pool, but I don't get in the ocean. And so the ocean makes me nervous. And so we're drifting, and finally, I was really afraid for myself. My dad, we had no life jackets, which was stupid, but my dad was here. I'm thinking, man, we are in big trouble. We are in such big trouble. And my friend Bill McCarthy noticed that I was a little concerned, and I was a little bit short with him in my attitude, and he said, hey, what's wrong, Jeff? I said, well, dude, man, we've been drifting out here for hours. We have no idea where we are. He said, Jeff, it's called an anchor. We're about 500 feet from the shore. I said, really? He said, yeah, Jeff, you think I would just, Jeff, I put the anchor down, I put it down deep into the rocks. We're not going anywhere. How do you know where the shore is? Well, I'm just familiar with this territory. Shore's right over there. You just couldn't see it because of the water in the clouds? Okay. I felt pretty stupid. And he tried to explain to me that the ebb and flow of the water, the vicissitudes, they really don't matter because you're anchored, you're staying in one place. Now stay with me, I got to move quickly. Here's our problem. The reason we are the way we are, and I said we, is because you got the wrong anchor. You got the wrong anchor. You say, well, Pastor Jeff, you need to get some new material. You've been saying this for a long time. No. I'm going to say it till you get it. Because you know well and good that your security is not in God. You want it to be, but it's in other things. Your demeanor changes and fluctuates based on how much money you have in the bank. For many of you, you're happy when you got a lot, you're sad when you don't, because your trust is in money. Your demeanor changes when you think you're fat or when you're skinny. Your demeanor changes when you think people value or don't value you, when somebody says a compliment to you when they don't. Your demeanor changes based on your position at work or the power that you have in your life. All of those things are always shifting and changing. And here's the reason why. Your anchor is one like this. I mean, this anchor is not real. This is just for show. Look at this thing, man. It goes nowhere. It goes nowhere. For many of you, you got the wrong anchor. And it has no chance of going deep enough. And when you got the wrong anchor, your life is unstable at best, man. At best, it's unstable. At worst, you live a total life of fear, anxiety, and panic. Because your soul knows, man, everything you got your trust in is temporary at best. And sooner or later, it will let you down. The other problem with a lot of us is we have the right anchor. It's God, but it doesn't go down deep enough. It's not like this, it's like that. You believe in God. But if truth were known, you really don't believe that He'll deliver for you. So you take matters into your own hands and keep taking the fruit of the tree and you keep bringing death into your life. And the reason is because you don't trust God's way. You just don't. And your anchor's there, but you're spinning all over because it doesn't go down deep enough into the rocks. You believe that all of history is his story. You just believe your story he forgot about. And you've kind of been sidelined, and he's not involved in your life. Now, here's the good news, and here's the story of Genesis 15, and I got to do it quickly. Guess what? God does not get angry with you because your anchor doesn't go deep enough. He feels sorry for you. He knows you need help. So he wants to help you get the anchor down so that you can live the big life. Notice what happens. Here we go. Genesis 15:8. But Abram said, "O sovereign Lord, how can I know I will gain possession of it? God, how do I know you're going to fulfill all these promises? I know you have a hope and a future, and your intention is to prosper me. But God, how can I know? How can I be sure? God, help me." And God doesn't say, "How dare you ask me that, Abraham? Who do you think you are? Don't you know who? How dare you?" No, God says, "Okay, I know Abraham." Another example of God loving a man in the Scripture. I know. I'm going to help you. And here's what happens. Verse 9, so the Lord said to him, "Bring a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon." Abram brought all these things to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then the birds of prey came down on the carcass, but Abram drove them away. Now, does that seem just bizarre to you? And that's because Genesis was not written to you, it was written for you. But in the ancient world, notice Abraham doesn't say, "You want me to do what, when, and how? You want me to get a bunch of dead animals, cut them into pieces, separate them so there's a path right in between? What are you talking about?" No, Abraham knows exactly what's happening. Let me explain to you what's happening. You and I, when we enter into a contract, let's take a wedding. In New Zealand, we have what is called the signing of the register. And in America, we do the same thing, right? But we do it after the service, right? In New Zealand, you do it right in the middle of the service. You stop right in the middle, and you kneel down, both the bride and the groom with the pastor, and you sign right there in front of everybody. Because here's the idea. A contract is not a contract. A covenant is not a covenant until you've signed your name. That's how the West operates. "Oh, sovereign groom, how do I know that you will love me for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer?" The answer, I'll sign my name. When you buy a house, my wife and I lived in a trailer in a farmhouse most of our lives. Finally, after 25 years of marriage, we saved enough money to get our first house up in Upland, first house we've ever owned. And Yoli, our real estate agent, said, "Let me give you a warning, Jeff. When you come to settle on the house, you're going to sign more paper than you could ever imagine." And there was a stack this big that I had to sign an initial, sign an initial, sign an initial. I stopped reading after about the second page. I probably gave the universe away or something. Who knows? It's a contract. It's a promise. It's a commitment. You sign. Business partners do the same thing. They shake hands. It's an honorable thing, but they still sign because you're not held to the consequences of breaking the covenant until you sign. Once you sign and you violate the covenant, then you're held responsible. Unless, of course, you're married to my wife. She tells me, "If you ever leave me, I'll hunt you down like the dog that you are." And so that's a different story. Now, here's the point. Abraham did not live in a written culture. Abraham lived in an oral storytelling culture. So in his culture, when you wanted to make a covenant or a contract, you didn't write anything. You publicly acted out the consequences that you wanted to happen to you if you violated your covenant. You with me? Jeremiah 34:18. "The men who have violated my covenant and have not fulfilled the terms of the covenant they made before me, I will treat like the calf they cut in two and then walk between the pieces." In Abraham's day, you didn't shake somebody's hand in agreement. How wimpy is that? You cut animals up, and you posted them on each side, and then you walked through. And here's what you're demonstrating. If I don't keep my covenant and promise, may I be cut off from the land of the living. May I be cut into pieces. May I be bruised and separated like these animals on the ground. Now, do you know what's happening? Look at what happens next. The Bible says, the sun was setting. Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. And when the sun had set and the darkness had fallen, a smoking fire pot with blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. Abraham knew exactly what God was doing when he told him to go get the animals, cut them into pieces, and separate them. This is a covenant ratification ceremony. That's why Abraham doesn't say, "Well, you want me to do it?" No, he says, "Okay, God, we're going to enter into a covenant." Great. Abraham's expecting to walk through to keep his part of the bargain, yet God brings a deep sleep over him. And when he wakes up, you know what he sees? The Shekinah glory of God. These are the two words, same words used to describe God when he gives Moses the 10 Commandments, and there's smoke and fire on the mountain. And the same smoke and fire that led the children of Israel out of Egypt into the promised land. The pillar of cloud, the pillar of fire by day and night. Think about what happens here. He wakes up, and here's what he sees. It's the best way I can describe it to you. My grandfather had an old shed out back his house, and he kept firecrackers in there, but he would not let us light them all at once, just one or two at a time every time we came over. My brother and I got a great idea. Let's go out into the shed, close the door, and light all the firecrackers at once inside the shed. And so we went and we lit the firecrackers. Our grandfather heard what we were doing. He locks us in. And so all these firecrackers are going everywhere. Smoke is everywhere. We've got our lips down to the floor trying to breathe the oxygen about 1 inch from the floor. Smoke everywhere. You're overwhelmed. You can't breathe. You can't see straight. When my father died, my brothers asked if I'd do the funeral. I thought I could push back the emotions. I was fine until I walked in going through the chapel where we're going to have the funeral service, and there, plastered all over the wall, were pictures of my father with my children. And have you ever seen something or heard some news or received a phone call that you found it hard to stand? That you're so overwhelmed with sadness you can hardly stand? These are the two ideas. Abraham wakes up from his dream or his vision, and all of a sudden he sees walking through the pieces, smoke and fire and the Shekinah glory of God going through the pieces. Abraham had no idea. Genesis chapter 15, verse 17, it passed between the pieces what God was going to do. Now stay with me. I got to go quickly because I got to get you out and get the I hate this part. Do you know what's happening here? Do you realize what's going on? This is the gospel. This is the gospel already. There are two problems. When God gives us promise of what is to come, there are two problems. Number one is our problem with God. We say, God, how do I know I can trust you? How do I know that you really deliver? And God says, Abraham, I'm going to help you get the anchor down deep. And he says, we're going to enter into a covenant ratification ceremony, and I'm going to walk through the pieces. He's saying to Abraham, Abraham, if I don't keep my fulfillment, if I don't fulfill my part of the covenant, may I be cut into pieces. May I be cut off from the land of the living. May my immutability experience mutation. May my unchanging nature change. May the impossible become possible. May my immortality suffer mortality. May my infinitude suffer finitude. May God be killed. May I die. He who can never die, may I be cut off from the land of the living if I don't fulfill the covenant I've made with you. But the problem is, if Abraham's like us, and he is, Abraham's real problem is not with God. Who's Abraham's real problem with? Himself. He knows God's going to keep, but he's probably thinking, okay, God, I know you're going to keep your word, but I'm not sure I'm going to keep mine. I know that you're my God, but I'm not sure I'm going to stay your people. Because there are going to be times in my life where I'm going to mess up. I'm going to do the wrong even though I know they're right. There are valleys in my life when I'm not even going to seek you, God. There are times I'm going to stray from you. What about then? What about then, God? I mean, God, how many times will you really forgive me? I mean, is there a time when that's it? 10,476, that's it, the line right here. Now you forfeit all the promises. God, my real problem is not you, it's me. How do I know about me? How do I know that I won't blow it? How do I know I won't do something stupid and all the promises you've given I will forfeit? Most of us, if we're honest with ourselves, think on the day of accountability, we're going to walk up to God and God's going to be standing there like this. Really? You broke the covenant 1,000 times, but you expect me to keep my part of the bargain and say, come on in, faithful servant. God said, I'm going to help you with that, Abraham. This is so cool. God walked between the pieces, but he never said to Abraham, it's your turn. In the ancient world, two people both walked through. In the ancient world, sometimes you would have a king enter into a contract or covenant with a servant, but when you did, only the servant went through, not the king, and never the king on his own. But in this story, God did something that Abraham didn't even fathom until later on. God said, Abraham, I'm going to walk through the pieces on both of our behalves. This is the gospel. It is not a cooperative effort. It's not God helps those who help themselves. No. Do you see what's happening here? God says, Abraham, I know you're going to break your covenant. I know you will. I'm going to walk through the pieces for both of us. I will take the consequences of both of us. You with me? Abraham, may I be cut off from the land of the living if I don't uphold my part, but Abraham, may I be cut off from the land of the living if you don't do yours. Abraham, I'm going to bless you even if it means I have to die. And he did die. Because in Mark chapter 15, darkness came over the earth. the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And at 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me? And Isaiah 53 says, for he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people, he was punished. How could you ever doubt a God like this? Who would say, I'm going to make a covenant with you, and I know you're going to break it, but I am going to pay the penalty for your violation. And God walked between the pieces. And what was impossible became possible. His infinitude became finite. God died and was cut off from the land of the living, trampled in the dust. Darkness came over the land. Do you know what our problem is? Our problem, you know what it is? We don't trust God. Whatever he's done, whatever he does, it's never enough. That's why we're so bitter, because we don't trust God's justice. Think about it. You're angry and you're bitter and you're unforgiving because you don't trust God's justice. Delayed justice is not the same thing as no justice. And you want to take matters into your own hands, so you're bitter and you're angry at people. Even though God did this for you, you violated his covenant, you're quick to bring revenge on people who violate yours. You're bitter, we're angry, because we know the Bible says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, but we want to be used as God's instrument to bring it. We hate ourselves and we're riddled with low self-esteem because we really don't trust that God accepts us, that loves us, gives mercy and grace to us. We think it's based on our performance, so we never really trust God's love for it. Do you know why we disobey? We disobey because we don't trust the wisdom of God. We don't really believe that intimacy and in the presence of God is more valuable than anything we could get by disobedience. We think to ourselves, man, I better do what I think makes me happy right now, because if I do what God tells me, it may not make me happy and I'll lose out. What's the problem? You don't trust God. You don't trust God. Anxiety, fear, worry, doubt, depression. You don't trust God. Your anchor is in the water, but it doesn't go deep enough. Stay with me. There's only one thing you can do. Well, I know what it is, Pastor Jeff. I can get my anchor deep. You can't. Only God can. This is the beauty of the Christian story. It's nothing like ancient civilization, nothing like it at all. In this story, whatever God requires, he gives to you. So you go to God and you say, God, I got a problem. I don't trust you. God's not going to say, I never knew that. He's going to say, I know you don't. You're like Abraham, like everybody else, but I'll tell you what, Pastor Jeff, if you want your anchor to go deeper, I'll do it. I'm going to have to work on you for a while, but we're going to do it together. I'm going to get that anchor down real deep. The guy in the book of Mark said, help me in my unbelief. John the Baptist said, are you really the one? Jesus said, think about it now, John. Think about it. Think about what you've seen and heard. You'll know I'm the one. He doesn't say, how dare you ask me? Ask him to help you get your anchor down low. And whatever's happening around you, you will stand strong. You will weather the storm because you know he's faithful. And anytime you doubt it, you look back to Genesis 15. He walked through the pieces, not only for Abraham, but for you and me. I was with my friend. I got 1 minute left. I got to talk really fast. I was with my friend Ravi Zacharias this week. We were doing an apologetic conference at Cincinnati Christian University. And I stole that joke from Ravi, by the way. I told it to open the service, so if it wasn't funny, it's his fault. And we were tag teaming a little bit in apologetic, tough issues. And the last night, he was the speaker, and I was to introduce him. And so I walked on stage, introduced him. I went back and sat down. There was a young man by the name of Nabil who travels with Ravi. He was a Muslim for most of his life. He's got PhDs from everywhere, Cambridge, Oxford. It's incredible how smart he is. I sat beside him. He told me his story. All his life, he tried to serve a taskmaster, Allah, and somebody introduced him to the cross. And when he realized that whatever God requires, God gives, it overwhelmed him to such a degree that every time he sees a cross, he weeps. Now, you and I, you think that's crazy. That's because we become immune to it. But the story's new to him, and every time he sees a cross, he weeps. Folks, do you know what the upper story is? Wait a minute, Pastor Jeff. It took you 40 minutes just to do the lower. 30 seconds. You know what the upper story is? This. The upper story is when Abraham goes up to take the life of his son Isaac, but he knows God's not going to make him do it. How do you know that, Pastor Jeff? Genesis chapter 22, verse 5. He said to the servant, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship them. We will come back to you. He knows God's not going to get. He knows God. He trusts God. So much so that he's willing to start the knife down before the angel of the Lord grabs his arm, and he finds a ram in the thicket, and behold, what? God will provide the lamb. There is no story like this anywhere in ancient civilization, that what God requires, he gives. And let me tell you, we should be the happiest people on the planet, because we know God has given us a promise of a new hope, a new land, a new future. It will come, and no matter how bad things look right now, our anchor goes down deep, and we will not be dismayed. That's a good story. Amen? Father, thank you so much for our time together. Pray in Jesus' name that you would go with us, that you would open our eyes, and if there's anyone here right now that wants to know the difference between the story of Christ, history, all of history, and what God is doing in the world, that you would open their eyes as they seek you. Those who pray that the anchor would go down deep, I pray that you would bless them and start the journey in their lives where you're going to help them, as you did Abraham, to get the anchor down deep, is my prayer, our prayer together in Jesus' name. Everybody said, amen.